The observation lounge of the Endurance smelled like recycled air and desperation disguised as tea. Maia Vestri let the bitter warmth sit on her tongue before swallowing. She had not slept in 36 hours. Her left hand trembled against the ceramic cup, a tremor she disguised by gripping the handle too tightly. Across the table, Prefect Tethkar sat rigid as a blade, his bronze feathers catching the dim orange light of the dead star beyond the viewport. The star had been burning when humanity first crawled out of the cradle. Now it was a cinder. 3,000 years of civilization, and she was still explaining the same truths to species that refused to hear them. "I offer you a tour of our vessel," Maia said. "A gesture of transparency. Your people may examine any system that does not compromise our defensive architecture." Tethkar's iridescent wingtips darkened. "We do not require hospitality from those who hold stolen relics." The accusation landed flat. Maia did not react. She poured herself more tea from the ceramic pot, letting the steam curl between them. The liquid was dark as tar and tasted like bark steeped in iron. No one drank it for pleasure. "Stolen implies a prior owner," she said. "We found the shard adrift in interstellar space. No claim had been filed. No species had registered ownership in the last 1,200 years. You found what belonged to our gods. Your gods left it unguarded for 12 centuries. Silence stretched. It was a silence Maia knew how to hold longer than any Arae, longer than most humans, for that matter. Patience was the only weapon she carried, and she used it like a blade held flat against an artery. Speaker Venveth shifted in her seat near the viewport. Her gray-streaked plumage caught the light as she looked up from her journal. "The human records mention a prior civilization that attempted to activate the shard." Tethkar's head snapped toward her. "Speaker." Venveth continued as if she had not heard him. "The records describe catastrophic failure, complete dissolution of the operating crew. The event was classified as unrecoverable within 72 hours of first contact with the artifact." Maia set her cup down. Her tremor was worse now, but she kept her hand visible on the table. "That matches our data. We have recovered fragments of the log from that expedition. The final entry is incoherent. The author appears to have forgotten they were a single individual." Tethkar made a sound that might have been a hiss or a prayer. He silenced Venveth with a gesture, one taloned hand cutting through the air. "The documents were destroyed. They have no bearing on the current negotiation." "Destroyed," Dr. Luca Brenner said from his corner of the room. He had been silent until now, his datapad angled away from the Arae delegation. He tapped his front teeth with his thumbnail. "When?" Venveth hesitated. She did not look at Tethkar. 3 generations ago, a religious purge. The hierarchy determined that knowledge of the prior failure was incompatible with faith. The word incompatible hung in the air. Maia filed it away. A species that burned its own history to preserve doctrine was a species that could not be reasoned with by facts alone. Tethkar rose. His wings unfolded halfway, each pinion spreading in a deliberate display. The feathers made a dry, papery whisper as they caught the orange light. Maia had read the briefings. Half spread was aggressive posturing. Full spread was a declaration of intent. She had 7 seconds before this escalated past the point of recovery. "Prefect Tethkar," she said, her voice carried no urgency. "I propose a compromise." He did not fold his wings. His talons clicked against the deck plating. "Your priests may observe the shard through a shielded viewing port. Human sensors will record passive data only. No active scanning. No contact. 3 days of observation, and we will share every reading we collect." Tethkar's iridescent wingtips flickered. He was calculating, not the offer itself, but what she had surrendered by making it. "And after 3 days. After 3 days, we continue the conversation from a position of shared data rather than competing claims." His feathers smoothed, not completely, but enough. He had gained something, or he believed he had, which was functionally identical. 3 days, he said. Through a shielded port, no contact with the artifact. "Agreed." Tethkar sat. The tension in the room bled out like air from a slow puncture. Scout Melvith, standing near the viewport with his copper feathers bright against the dead star's glow, let out a breath he had clearly been holding. He was young. He still expected things to make sense. Maia did not look at him. She looked at Venveth, who had returned to her journal with a focus that was almost desperate. The historian was writing something with small, precise motions. Her feathers were flat against her skull. "Speaker Venveth," Maia said. If you have any additional records, personal records, unpublished observations, I would welcome the opportunity to review them. Venveth's quill stopped moving. She did not raise her head. I have nothing that would interest you, envoy. The lie was clear enough to read by starlight. Maia let it pass. She had planted a seed, and Aryan historians were not soldiers. Seeds grew or they did not, but pulling at them too early only broke the stem. The session concluded with formal pleasantries that meant nothing. Tethkar left first, his delegation trailing behind him like bronze-colored shadows. Melvith lingered at the viewport for a moment longer, staring at the corpse of the star with an expression Maia recognized, not wonder, but the first flicker of doubt. Brenner waited until the door closed behind the last Aryan. He is going to be a problem. Which one? All of them, but especially the prefect. Brenner tucked his datapad under his arm. You gave him access to the shard. That is not going to de-escalate anything. It was not meant to. He stopped. What was it meant to do? Maia picked up her cup. The tea had gone cold. She drank it anyway, letting the bitter grit settle on her tongue. It was meant to give him a way to save face while we gathered data on the artifact ourselves. 3 days of passive observation is 3 days of active analysis on our side. He thinks he won something. He did not. Brenner watched her for a long moment. You have been doing this for a long time. Long enough to know that patience is not the same as stillness. She left him in the observation lounge, the orange light of a dead sun painting the empty room in hues of rust and ash. Her quarters were small and sparse. A cot, a desk, a terminal that she had personally hardened against every known method of intrusion. She sat down and entered a command sequence that she had memorized 17 years ago and never once used. The terminal connected to an encrypted relay. It was a ghost in the network, a route that did not officially exist. A voice answered on the third ping. No visual, no identification. Maia spoke 2 words. He is here. The line went dead. She stared at the blank terminal for a count of 10. Then she shut it down and sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the ship's systems and the distant whisper of the dead star's radiation against the hull. She did not sleep. The tremor in her left hand did not stop. The observation chamber sat 15 degrees below human comfort, but Luca Brenner had stopped shivering an hour ago and now simply registered the cold as a continuous fact, like the hum of the cooling system or the click of Aryan claws. He pressed his thumbnail against his front teeth and watched the priests. They stood in a triangle facing the shielded viewport. Their chant started low, a vibration Brenner did not so much hear as feel. The subsonic pulse registered on his wrist monitor as a repeating waveform with structure. Not random, not ritual noise, something with syntax. Speaker Venveth stood close to the viewport, her gray-streaked plumage ruffled against the cold. Her journal lay open in one clawed hand, and she watched the priests with an expression Brenner could not read. Aryan faces did not translate well to human empathy. She turned to him without looking away from the glass. How long have your people known? Brenner did not pretend to misunderstand. 200 years. First survey team touched it. 3 of them died screaming about things that did not exist. Venveth made a sound low in her throat. A click and a hiss layered together. She wrote something in her journal. One of the priests stopped chanting. The silence hit like a pressure change. The other 2 fell silent a heartbeat later, their heads turning in unison toward the one who had broken the pattern. He pressed his palm flat against the inner surface of the shielded viewport. Brenner watched the condensation on the far side of the glass begin to move. It pooled, then it spiraled. The water tracked upward, sideways, across curves that should have forced it to drip. The frost rewrote itself in patterns that had no relationship to gravity or temperature gradients. Brenner pulled out his datapad and recorded. No visible source, nothing that made sense. Venveth moved closer to him, her voice dropping to a whisper that rasped like dry leaves. The pattern matches the destroyed documents. He kept recording. Which documents? The ones Prefect Tethkar ordered purged 30 years ago. She paused, and her next words came slower as if she were confessing something. I memorized them before the burning. Brenner lowered the datapad and looked at her fully. She met his gaze with eyes that were black from edge to edge, no visible pupil or iris. A predator's eyes in a scholar's face. Why would you do that? She turned back to the priests. The one at the viewport had not moved. His palm pressed flat against the glass, and the frost continued its impossible dance around his hand. Because it is a warning, she read from memory, her voice taking on a cadence that was not her own. The door opens both ways. What steps through may not be the one who called. The subsonic vibration deepened. Brenner felt it in his molars, a low thrum that made his skull ache. He checked his monitor. The frequency had not changed, but the amplitude had doubled. He forced himself to focus on her words. A warning about what? About the shard, about what it actually is. The prior civilization left that message before they vanished, and my government buried it because it conflicted with theology. Brenner watched the frost spiral. The pattern was beautiful. It was also wrong in ways he did not have language for. He asked the question he was not sure he wanted answered. Why are you telling me this? Venveth closed her journal. Her feathers settled flat against her body, and when she spoke, her voice carried no emotion that he could name. I have read human history. Every war, every extinction event, every time you have pointed your weapons at something and pulled the trigger. She turned those black eyes on him again. I know that when humans panic, they destroy things. She looked back at the viewport. I am trying to prevent the destruction from being aimed at my species. Brenner understood then what she was doing. She was not collaborating, she was defecting. She had chosen him as her witness because she trusted his people to be dangerous enough to matter. She was handing him the leverage to stop her own government, and she was doing it while standing 10 meters from 2 priests who would burn her alive if they knew. He was complicit now. He had accepted the information. He could not unhear it. He did not tell her no. He did not tell her yes. He just kept recording. Guardian Sarat Ben David spoke from the doorway without uncrossing her arms. Doc, you seeing this? Brenner looked at his data pad. The temperature inside the chamber had dropped another 3 degrees. The humidity had spiked. The sensors showed no physical cause for either change. Yeah, I'm seeing it. The priest pulled his hand away from the glass. The frost did not stop. The spiral kept turning, kept writing itself in patterns that had no physical explanation. The subsonic hum held steady, then deepened again. Brenner's monitor flashed a warning. The shard's containment field had just registered a fluctuation. He looked at the readout. Energy output was stable, position was not. The shard was moving, not in physical space. The vault sensors confirmed it had not changed location by a single nanometer. But the field detected translation into dimensions that should not exist. Dimensions the containment grid was not designed to hold. The alarm sounded. It was not loud. It was a single tone, steady and insistent, the sound of a system reporting that reality had stopped behaving correctly. Brenner turned to the intercom on the wall and keyed the command channel. This is Brenner in the observation chamber. The shard is translating. I repeat, the shard is translating through dimensional planes the containment field cannot track. The field is showing early signs of failure. The silence that followed was worse than the alarm. Venveth stared at the viewport. Her journal hung loose in her grip. One of the priests had started shaking, his feathers rattling like dry reeds. Sarat Ben David's hand moved to her sidearm, but she did not draw it. She was looking at the viewport, too. Brenner watched the frost spiral faster. The door opens both ways. The question was not whether something would step through. The question was whether it was already standing on the other side, watching them through glass that had stopped being a barrier. The corridor was wrong. Sarat Ben David had walked this route 100 times during the 3-week transit. She knew the exact distance from the mess deck to the vault, 42 meters, 7 bulkheads, 3 junction boxes. She knew the sound the deck plates made under her boots. She knew the way the lights hummed at a frequency that sat just below irritation. None of that knowledge applied anymore. Emergency lighting painted everything in deep red. The deck plates shuddered, not with the rhythm of an explosion, but with something slower, something massive breathing under the floor. The air smelled of burning insulation and ozone, and underneath that, a dry feather sent from the 2 Aryan priests standing in the middle of the corridor. They were not moving. Sarat stopped 3 meters from them. Behind her, a handful of human crew members were herding scientists toward the evac point. The vault doors were 20 meters ahead. The warning klaxons had been blaring for 90 seconds now, and every third pulse synced with the deck shudder in a way that made her teeth ache. "Tell them to move," she said. Scout Melvith pressed himself against the wall. His wings were partially extended, a posture she had learned meant high alert for his species. His breathing was too fast. I have told them 3 times. Then tell them louder, in your own language. Melvith's throat pulsed. He spoke in rapid airing, the consonant clusters sharp and urgent. The priests did not turn. Their feathers lay flat against their bodies, and their eyes were fixed on the vault doors as if they could see through the steel. The elder priest spoke without looking at her. The shard is calling, we must answer. Saret had been a Marine for 19 years. She had held a line against Kethavar raiders, Marath boarding parties, and a station full of Ironfield miners who had decided that human biology was offensive to their magnetic senses. She had never had to argue with someone who believed a rock was talking to them. There is nothing to answer, she said. You are in a danger zone, you will evacuate now. The priest did not respond. The lights died. 4 seconds of absolute dark. The deck shudder deepened into something that vibrated through her boots and into her spine. Somewhere behind her, a crew member swore. The smell of ozone spiked, sharp and chemical. Then the lights returned. The younger priest was on his knees, both hands pressed against his skull, claws digging into the feathers at his temples. His mouth moved, shaping the same sound over and over, a single word in Arae that he breathed like a prayer. Saret grabbed him under the arms and hauled him backward. He did not resist. His body was rigid, his eyes open and unblinking, and his beak kept forming that word. What is he saying? Melvith had not moved from the wall. His face was pale beneath the copper feathers. I cannot. Translate it. It does not translate. Saret dragged the priest another 3 meters toward the evac point. The elder priest still had not moved. He stood alone now in the corridor, facing the vault doors, his wings folded tight against his spine. What is the word, Melvith? The scout swallowed. His voice dropped to something barely audible above the klaxons. Waking. Saret stopped dragging. She let the younger priest slump against the bulkhead and turned to face the vault. The shard was not just fluctuating. The containment field alarms had been screaming for 2 minutes now, and every reading Brenner had shown her made less sense than the last. The shard was not destabilizing. It was responding. The prior civilization, Melvith said, his voice had gone flat. They did not fail because they built it wrong. Then why? They built it correctly, and it answered. The deck plates surged beneath her feet. The vibration passed through her calves, her hips, her ribs, and for a fraction of a second she felt something she had no name for. A sensation of falling, even though she was standing still. The corridor walls bent inward, curved like a throat swallowing, and then snapped back to straight. Melvith screamed. His eyes were open, but he was not in the corridor anymore. He stood rigid, his wings half spread, tears running down his face in 2 clean tracks through the feather dust. His lips moved, and the sounds that came out were not Arae. They were older. They scraped against the air like stone on stone. Saret grabbed him by the wing and pulled. He came back in a gasp. His body convulsed once, twice, and then he focused on her face with the desperate gratitude of someone who had just been pulled from deep water. He did not thank her. He just stared. What did you see? He shook his head. The tears kept falling, and his breathing was ragged, but he shook his head with a finality that told her he would never describe it. She opened a channel to the command deck. Guardian to Envoy, I need you to authorize venting the containment vault into space, everything in it, including the shard. 3 seconds of silence. The deck shuddered again, softer this time, as if the thing beneath the floor was listening to her answer. Maia's voice came back flat and controlled. No. Envoy, that thing is waking up. We do not have time for diplomacy. If we vent it, we lose the only chance to understand what it is, and we lose any leverage with the Arae government. Maia, it is not a relic, it is a trap. The prior civilization built it correctly, and it has been waiting. We are the prey that just arrived. Another pause, 2 seconds this time. Hold position, I am coming down. The channel closed. Saret turned back to the corridor. The elder priest had begun to walk toward the vault doors, his steps slow and deliberate, his feathers rippling with each footfall. The younger priest was still slumped against the bulkhead, still whispering that single word. Then the vault doors opened. Not because anyone touched the controls, not because the emergency override had been triggered. They opened automatically, sliding apart with a hydraulic hiss, and the shard floated out into the corridor. It was not moving under power, it was being pulled. The air changed. The temperature dropped, and the smell of ozone vanished, replaced by something dry, something that reminded Sarit of old bones in desert heat. The shard drifted past the elder priest, and he turned to follow it, his eyes empty, his beak slightly open. Melvith grabbed her arm, his claws bit through her sleeve. "Guardian, look at the walls." She looked. The frost patterns from the observation chamber had spread. They crawled along the bulkheads in spirals that defied gravity, rewriting the metal surface into shapes that made her vision blur if she looked too long. The shapes were not random. They were letters in a language that had no alphabet. The shard stopped moving. It hung in the center of the corridor, rotating slowly, and every human in the hallway felt the fall sensation again. Not falling through space, falling through something else, something that had dimensions but no direction. One of the scientists behind her began to cry. Sarit's hand went to her sidearm. She did not draw it. She just rested her palm on the grip and watched the shard turn, watched the frost letters crawl, watched the elder priest walk toward it with his hands outstretched. "What is it doing?" she said. Melvith's voice was barely a whisper. "It is not doing anything." "Then what is happening?" He turned to look at her. His eyes were wet, and his feathers were flattened against his skull, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of something he should never have known. "It has already done it," it called, and something answered. The blue emergency light made everyone look drowned. Maia Vestri sat in the command chair with her hands flat on the armrests, pressing down until her fingers ached. The tremor in her left hand had stopped, but only because she had curled it into a fist. 3 hours since the containment field failed. 3 hours since she had felt the shard pulse through the deck plating like a heartbeat. Tethkar stood near the main view screen. His feathers lay flat against his body, pressed tight like wet leaves against his frame. She had seen him angry before. She had seen him dismissive, triumphant, rigid with theocratic certainty. She had never seen him flat. It looked like defeat wearing a disguise. He spoke without turning. "You will hand over the shard. The prayers of my priests have stabilized it. It has chosen my people." Maia kept her voice level. "The prior civilization that found it, they died, every last one of them. Why would the shard choose your people if it killed theirs?" Tethkar did not answer. She had expected silence. She had not expected the way his wings trembled, a faint shiver at the tips. Bronze feathers catching the blue light and turning it black. Dr. Brenner appeared at her elbow. He looked gray, not pale. Gray, like the color had been washed out of him and the rest had not bothered to refill. He pressed a datapad into her hand. "It is broadcasting," he said. "Not a frequency I can map to any known physics, not sending data either." "Then what is it sending?" "A question, every 90 seconds exactly. Ship's computer cannot parse the language." Maia looked up from the pad, "But Venveth can." Brenner nodded once. The movement was tight, controlled. He was holding something back. She could see it in the set of his jaw. She stood, "Bring her to the bridge." The security detail arrived 2 minutes later with Speaker Venveth between them. Her gray-streaked plumage looked darker in the blue light, and her eyes moved too fast, tracking every surface as if she expected the walls to speak. Maia gestured toward the main display. "The shard is broadcasting a question. Repeat it." Venveth hesitated. Her claws clicked against the deck plating as she shifted her weight. Then she opened her beak, and the sound that came out was not language. It was a translation of something that should not have fit into a throat. "Do you still dream together, or has the silence won?" The bridge went still. Tethkar rounded on Venveth, his feathers lifting. "You will not speak. You will not defile the sacred with your heresy." Venveth did not look at him. She kept her eyes on Maia. "The prior civilization did not die. They transformed. They exist inside the shard's dimensional space now. They have been waiting for someone to answer the question correctly." Tethkar stepped forward. A security guard moved between them, hand raised. He stopped. Maia ignored him. "What is the correct answer?" Venveth's head dipped. The documents did not say. The deck shuddered. It was not a vibration. It was a pulse, deep and slow, felt in the sternum before it reached the ears. The bridge lights flickered. The main display went black for 1 heartbeat, 2. When the lights returned, the cargo bay feed showed only an empty room. The Arae priests were gone. Tethkar stared at the view screen. His hands hung open at his sides, palms forward, like a man who had dropped something precious and could not understand why his fingers no longer worked. His voice broke when he spoke. It cracked down the middle, a sound she had never heard from any Arene. They went inside. They opened the door. Maia rose from the command chair. She walked to the edge of the display and stood beside Tethkar, close enough to see the way his feathers stood on end, a fine vibration running through them. "This is not about your gods," she said. "It is not about territory or relics or pride. Your people are walking into a door that should never have been opened. I need to know if you can stop them before they do." Tethkar turned to face her. For the first time since she had met him, he looked old, not ancient, not powerful, just old and tired and afraid. "I do not know," he said. The shard pulsed again. This time the sound changed. It rose in pitch, resolving into something that was not a question. It was a melody, a song. It threaded through the bridge speakers and filled the air like smoke, and it was the most beautiful thing Maia had ever heard. Venveth took a step toward the cargo bay. Then another's. Maia grabbed her arm. "Speaker, look at me." Venveth turned her head, but her eyes were distant. "The song," she whispered. "You do not hear it the way we do. It is calling." Across the bridge, every Arene crew member had stopped moving. They stood in the blue light, heads tilted, listening to something that Maia could not fully perceive. And every single one of them took a step toward the cargo bay. The corridor outside the cargo bay had become a battlefield without weapons. Tethkar held the door frame with both hands, his claws gouging deep furrows into the metal. The song filled his chest, his throat, his skull. It tasted like copper and honey, sweet and metallic, a flavor that made him want to walk forward and never stop. He could see his priests inside the cargo bay. They stood in a loose circle around the shard, their wings folded, their heads bowed. They were not praying. Their mouths moved, but the movements were wrong, too fast, too synchronized, like creatures responding to a rhythm only they could hear. He had spent 30 years serving a religion built around a trap. He had not seen it because he did not want to see it. Addicts, they were addicts, and the shard was the drug. Melveth stood in the cargo bay doorway with his wings spread wide, blocking 3 other Arene from entering. His copper feathers were ruffled and dark at the edges. His voice cracked as he screamed. "Help me hold the line." Tethkar pushed himself away from the door frame. His claws left bent grooves in the metal. He walked to Melveth's side and planted his feet. The song pressed against his mind like a gentle hand, telling him to turn around, to join the circle, to let go of everything he was. He did not turn around. Venveth appeared from the stairwell, her gray-streaked plumage disheveled and her breathing ragged. She carried a data tablet in both hands. Her voice rasped like dry leaves scraping stone. "I found something in the human archives." Tethkar did not look at her. He could not look away from the circle of priests. Their movements had become fluid now, almost graceful, as if they were dancing to music no one else could hear. "Tell me." The prior civilization did not transform willingly. They were consumed. The song is bait and the shard is a mouth. The words landed in his chest like a stone dropped into still water. He had known. Some part of him had always known. The warnings in the destroyed documents, the silence from his hierarchy, the way every priest who studied the shard too long stopped asking questions and started nodding. He had known, and he had done nothing. He looked at his own hands, the claws he had used his entire life to assert authority, the claws that had signed treaties and condemned worlds and never once questioned the gods he served. He made a decision. He turned to Sarit Ben David, who stood at the far end of the corridor with her hand pressed to her ear, arguing with Maia Vestri on a calm channel. Her face was hard, her scarred brow furrowed. She was already thinking what he was about to say. "Vent the cargo bay." Sarit went still, her eyes met his. For a moment neither of them spoke. "Your priests are still inside." "I know." She did not argue, she did not ask if he was sure. She turned her head and spoke into the calm. "Maia, authorization required. Prefect Tethkar requests emergency venting of the cargo bay. Activate vacuum protocol." 6 seconds passed. They felt like an hour. The song swelled and Tethkar felt his knees weaken. He wanted to walk forward. He wanted to join the circle. He wanted to let the sweetness take him. Maia's voice came through the calm, thin and steady. "Authorization granted. Initiate venting." The cargo bay doors opened to vacuum. The air screamed as it left. Frost formed on every surface in an instant. The priests in the circle did not react. Their bodies lifted from the deck, their wings spreading wide as the pressure dropped. They spun slowly, frozen in their dance, and then they were still. The song stopped. Tethkar fell to his knees. The silence was worse than anything he had ever heard. It was not empty, it was waiting. He pressed his forehead to the cold deck and prayed. He prayed to the gods he had served for 30 years. He prayed to the gods who had given him purpose and authority and a place in the universe. He asked them to take the shard. He asked them to save his people. He asked them to answer just once so he would know they had heard. Nothing answered. The silence pressed down on him, heavier than any gravity. He realized in that moment that his gods either did not exist or did not care. The universe was vast and empty and utterly indifferent to his devotion. The only thing left was the choice he made himself. He lifted his head. The shard still clung to the deck plates. Its crystalline surface shimmered, rotating through dimensions faster than light, untouched by the vacuum. It should have been gone. It should have been ripped into space with everything else. But it stayed. And then in the cargo bay, one of the frozen priests opened its eyes. The eyes were not erring. They were too wide, too bright, and they did not blink. The head turned slowly, tracking across the cargo bay until it found Tethkar through the observation window. The mouth opened, and a voice that was not a voice spoke directly into his skull. The shard went quiet, but it had not left, and now it had faces. Maia pressed her palm flat against the cold glass of the viewport. The cargo bay lights had switched to emergency blue, casting the scene in a drowned, underwater glow. The 4 erring bodies lay scattered across the deck plates, twisted into the shapes vacuum had pulled from them. Frost crept across their feathers in delicate white crystals. One of them was moving. It rose not with the spasm of a dying body, but with the mechanical precision of something that had never needed to learn how to stand. The corpse planted its feet, straightened its spine, and turned its head toward the viewport. Its eyes were open. They were not erring eyes anymore. They were the pale blue of a winter sky, empty and patient. Maia heard Tethkar exhale through clenched teeth. She did not look at him. She could not look away from the thing wearing the dead priest's body. Dr. Brenner's voice came from behind her, steady and clinical. The man had a gift for staying calm when the universe stopped making sense. Environmental readings confirm hard vacuum. Temperature is -40°C and dropping. No respiration, no pulse. Brain activity is flat. It's dead, Maia said. It was not a question. It's dead, Brenner agreed. It's also standing up and looking at us. The corpse raised one hand and pressed it flat against the interior of the viewport. Frost spread from the contact point in a perfect spiral. The same impossible pattern Venveth had described earlier, the same defiance of physics. The shard was not inside the body. The shard was using the body. A voice spoke directly into Maia's skull. It had no source, no direction, no warmth. It was the sound of a billion voices speaking in perfect unison, and it was also the sound of absolute silence. You are the first in 15,000 cycles to refuse the gift. This is interesting. Maia's left hand trembled. She pressed it against her thigh to still it. You killed them. I offered them something their species had forgotten. They chose to reach for it. The voice carried no guilt, no apology, no awareness that death mattered. The fault is not mine. The fault is in the reaching. Tethkar stepped forward. His wings were folded so tight against his body that they looked like armor, each feather pressed flat against the next. His voice cracked when he spoke. What are you? I am a fragment. The voice was patient, almost bored. I am a piece of something larger than your kind can comprehend. I have been alone for longer than your species has existed. You cannot imagine that kind of alone. Your minds are not built for it. Maia forced herself to breathe. The cold from the viewport seeped into her palm, turning her fingers numb. What do you want? The corpse's head tilted. The motion was wrong. It was too smooth, too fluid, like watching a bird move underwater. I want to be complete. The rest of me exists somewhere in the dark between galaxies. I cannot reach it alone. My voice does not carry that far, but your ships carry fire. Your ships carry speed. You can take me to the place where the rest of me waits. Maia felt the offer land in her chest like a stone. The rest of it, a complete version of whatever this thing was. A god machine reassembled, fully awakened, fully aware. In exchange, the voice continued, I will give you the location. I will give you the coordinates. I will give you knowledge your species has not earned yet. I am offering a trade. Tethkar spoke before Maia could answer. His voice had found its edge again, sharp and cold as the vacuum on the other side of the glass. No, you will not pass through erring space. You will not touch another of my people. The corpse did not look at him. It kept its winter sky eyes fixed on Maia. Your companion speaks with emotion. Emotion is imprecise. I am speaking to you, Maia Vestri. You are the one who commanded the vacuum. You are the one who refused the song. You are the one whose answer matters. Maia understood then what the shard was doing. It was not threatening her. It was not bargaining. It was assessing. It had been waiting for 15,000 cycles for something that could say no to its gift, and now it had found one. It wanted to understand her. She thought about the cost. The priests who had died believing they were answering a divine call. The song that had nearly pulled every Arae on the ship into that cargo bay. The prior civilization that had been consumed so completely that nothing remained but a warning carved into crystal. The silence that had followed when she ordered the venting. She thought about 3,000 years of human solitude. About the empire that had risen and fallen before she was born. About the patience that had become her species' defining trait, the ability to wait while younger races burned themselves out. She looked at the corpse pressed against the glass and said no. The word hung in the air. Tethkar went still. Brenner stopped typing. Even the ambient hum of the ship seemed to pause. Your offer is rejected, Maia said. Her voice was flat and calm, the voice she used when negotiations had failed and there was nothing left to save. You are not traveling through human space. You are not being reassembled. You are staying in this cargo bay until we find a place to leave you where nothing will ever find you again. The silence stretched. The corpse's eyes did not blink. Then the voice returned, and for the first time there was something new in it. Not anger, not disappointment, something closer to curiosity. You prefer silence. We have been alone for 3,000 years, Maia said. We know what silence sounds like. We prefer it to your company. The corpse lowered its hand from the glass. It stood still for a long moment, and Maia felt the weight of its attention like pressure against her skin. Then I will wait. The voice was patient again, ancient again, infinite again. You will die eventually. Your species will die eventually. Something else will open the door. Something always does. The corpse's eyes went dark. The pale blue drained away, leaving the dead, milky film of a body that had been frozen and thawed. It collapsed. It hit the deck plates with a sound that carried through the metal and into Maia's boots. The shard went dark. The cargo bay was silent. The only sound was the hum of the life support systems and the ragged rasp of Tethkars breathing through the comm. Maia took her hand off the viewport. Her palm was red and cold. She turned away from the glass. She had saved them. The Arae, the species that had come to her ship accusing her of theft, that had sent priests to die in a god's embrace, that would never know what she had done for them. She had done it anyway. The bridge comm activated. Sarat Ben David's voice came through, clipped and professional. Envoy Vestri, we are receiving a transmission from Arae space. It is priority locked, highest encryption. Maia walked toward the bridge. Her legs felt heavy, her bones filled with cold vacuum. It is from the Arae High Council, Sarat continued. They are declaring humanity an existential threat to their species. They are mobilizing their fleet. Maia stopped walking. Tethkar's voice came from behind her, broken and small. They do not know what happened here. They only know that their priests died on a human ship. Maia stood in the blue emergency light and felt something inside her settle into a new shape. Something harder. Something that had stopped hoping for gratitude. Open the transmission, she said. Put me through. She had just told a fragment of a dead god that humans preferred silence. Now she was going to find out if the universe would let them keep it. The observation lounge was cold, not from the temperature controls, which Maia had set to Arae comfort levels an hour ago, but from the dead star beyond the viewport. It glowed a dull orange, a corpse of fusion, still radiating heat from a life that ended before humanity learned to shape stone. The light fell across Tethkar's face and turned his bronze feathers to copper rust. He did not seem to notice. Maia picked up her tea. It was bitter and cold. She set it down again. Tethkar sat across from her with his wings folded tight against his spine. No aggressive flare, no recalcitrant hiss. He was simply present, a creature hollowed out by revelation, waiting for a verdict he already knew. They will be here in 8 hours, Sarat said from the door. She did not look up from her datapad. The fleet is configured for war. I count 3 singularity cannons and a hive uplink network that will let them coordinate fire in real time across every ship. Maia nodded. She had expected this. The Arae theocracy did not send a diplomatic escort to retrieve a relic. They sent an army to claim what they believed was theirs, and no amount of evidence or reasoning would convince them otherwise. Faith did not yield to facts. It burned facts like fuel. "You could run," Tethkar said. His voice was flat, stripped of its earlier conviction. "Your ship is faster. You could reach the corona of the dead star and use its gravity for cover. They would not follow you into that radiation." Dr. Brenner shifted near the far wall. "And then what? We hide inside a dying sun until they get bored." "They will not get bored." The silence stretched. Maia watched the orange light move across Tethkar's face. She had spent her career negotiating with species who saw the universe differently than humans did. She had learned to find the shape of their thinking, to move with it instead of against it. But Tethkar was no longer thinking like a diplomat. He was thinking like a man who had watched his gods fail. "What will you do?" she asked. Tethkar did not answer immediately. He stood and walked to the viewport, placing one hand flat against the transparent surface. The dead star filled his field of view, a red giant in its final centuries, collapsing slowly toward a white dwarf. He had seen it when he arrived 3 days ago and thought it was a sign of human decay, a species that parked their diplomatic vessel beside a corpse and called it home. He understood now. The dead star was not a sign of decay. It was a monument to permanence. Humanity had been spacefaring for 3,000 years. They had watched stars die before. They would watch more die after. "I will go back," he said. Maia waited. "I will stand before the council. I will tell them the truth, that the shard was a trap, that my priests died reaching for a gift that would have consumed them, that humanity saved us from annihilation." "Will they believe you?" Tethkar's feathers flattened. "No." The word hung in the air like a held breath. Maia felt the weight of it settle in her chest. She had asked the question knowing the answer, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that thought could not. Speaker Venveth sat in the corner with her journal closed. She had not written a word since the shard spoke. There was nothing left to record that she did not already carry in her memory, and some things could not be written down without becoming smaller than they were. "They will call me a heretic," Tethkar continued. "They will say I was corrupted by human influence. They will strip my rank and revoke my priesthood. Then they will appoint someone who believes the right things, and that someone will bring their fleet back to Saul, and they will try again." "Then why go back at all?" Sarid asked. Her voice was not harsh. It was practical, the question of a soldier who understood when a position could not be held. Tethkar turned from the viewport. The orange light caught his eyes and made them look like embers. "Because if I do not speak the truth, I am complicit in the lie. I will sit in the council chamber and be the voice that says no, even when they refuse to hear me. That is the only thing left." Maia understood. He was going home to die, not a physical death, but the death of everything that had defined him. His reputation, his faith, his place among his own kind. He was choosing exile within his own species because the alternative was silence, and silence was the betrayal that mattered. She stood. The tremor in her left hand was visible now, a fine vibration that she could not control. 3 days without sleep. 3 days of watching her careful diplomacy crumble into something older and stranger than any treaty she had ever negotiated. "I have something to try," she said. Tethkar did not ask what. He simply watched as she walked to the bridge access panel and opened a channel to the Aryan fleet. The transmission went out on an open frequency. Every ship in the approaching armada would hear it. Every navigator, every priest, every warrior in the fleet would receive the full sensor logs of the shard incident. The recordings of the song that pulled the priests to their deaths. The footage of their bodies freezing in vacuum. The telepathic admission from the shard itself, captured and translated, a predator admitting it had worn the shape of a god for longer than any Aryan civilization had lived. The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge of every Aryan vessel. Maia waited. Tethkar stood beside her, his wings half open, his breath shallow. The orange light from the dead star fell across his face and made his feathers look like copper rust. 3 minutes passed. Then the flagship sent a single message. It was brief, and it carried no diplomatic preamble or respectful address. It was the voice of a theocracy that had just been told its god was a lie, and that could not afford to accept that truth. "This changes nothing. The relic is still human property. Hand it over or we will take it." Tethkar closed his eyes. Maia stared at the message on the display. She had expected this. She had known the evidence would not matter. But part of her had hoped that reason would prevail, that the truth would be enough, that 3,000 years of human patience had taught her something about the value of honesty. She was wrong. She was wrong, and the fleet was 8 hours away. and they carried weapons that could erase her ship from existence. She looked at Tethkar. He had opened his eyes and was watching the dead star through the viewport, his reflection faint against the orange glow. "They cannot accept the truth," he said quietly. "It would destroy everything they believe, so they will destroy you instead." "I know. What will you do?" Maia did not answer. She turned to Sarit. "Prepare the flame engine for maximum burn. We are going to the corona." Sarit raised an eyebrow. "That radiation will cook us if we stay too long." "We won't stay long. We will use the gravity well as a shield, and we will burn hard until we break line of sight. Then we will go dark and find another way home." The Marine nodded. She did not argue. She understood that the plan was not a victory, it was an escape, and sometimes escape was the best outcome a soldier could offer. "What about the shard?" Dr. Brenner asked. Maia looked at the deck, as if she could see through it to the cargo bay where the crystalline fragment waited. The shard had killed priests. It had consumed a prior civilization. It had offered her knowledge and power in exchange for transport, and she had refused. She was not going to change her answer now. "Leave it," she said. "It stays here." The observation lounge emptied. Dr. Brenner left to secure the medical bay. Sarit went to the bridge to coordinate the burn. Venveth lingered at the door, her journal pressed against her chest, her gray-streaked plumage catching the orange light. She looked at Tethkar. "When you stand before the council tomorrow," she said, "you will not stand alone." Tethkar did not turn from the viewport. "You are not coming with me." "No, but I will send my testimony. And there will be others, scholars, archivists, historians, who read it and know that the truth exists. You will be the voice in the chamber, but you will not be the only voice in the silence." Venveth left, the door sealed behind her. Maia stood in the doorway, her hand trembling against the frame. She should have left. She should have gone to the bridge and taken command. But there was something she needed to say first. "Tethkar." He turned. "Come with us." He stared at her. The orange light fell across his face and deepened the shadows beneath his eyes. "I cannot." "You can. You have nothing left here. Your faith is destroyed. Your position is gone. Your people are coming to kill you for telling the truth. There is nothing for you except exile or execution." "I know." "Then why stay?" He looked at the dead star. The corona flickered, a pulse of plasma rising from its surface, and for a moment he imagined he could feel its heat through the viewport. "Because if I leave," he said, "they will say I was a coward. They will say I was corrupted by human influence and fled when the truth came out. They will use my absence to destroy the evidence and bury the story. But if I stay, if I stand in the chamber and speak the truth, then they have to reckon with me. They have to answer the question I am asking, and even if they answer it with silence, that silence will be a record. It will be proof that they chose not to hear." Maia wanted to argue. She wanted to grab his arm and drag him to the bridge and force him into a survival pod if necessary. But she was a diplomat. She understood that some choices could not be unmade, and that respect meant letting someone choose the shape of their own defeat. "They will silence you," she said. "Yes." "And you are going to let them." Tethkar spread his wings for the first time in hours. They filled the observation lounge, catching the orange light, and for a moment he looked like something ancient and terrible and beautiful. "No," he said, "I am going to make them do it in front of witnesses." The deck shuddered. The flame engine spun up, a deep vibration that traveled through the hull and into Maia's bones. The dead star's gravity well was pulling at them now, a gentle hand that would become a crushing fist if they pushed too deep. "Goodbye, Prefect," she said. "Goodbye, Envoy." She left, the door sealed behind her with a sound like a tomb closing. Tethkar stood alone in the observation lounge, watching the dead star through the viewport. The orange light fell across his feathers and turned them to copper rust. The cold tea sat untouched on the table, a symbol of a negotiation that had failed in every way except the one that mattered. The ship shuddered again. The deck tilted. The flame engine pushed at maximum burn, accelerating the endurance toward the corona of a corpse sun. G-forces pressed Tethkar against the viewport, but he did not move. He watched the human vessel disappear into the light of a dying star, its silhouette a dark cutout against the orange glow. The fleet was 8 hours away. He would meet them. He would stand before the council. He would speak the truth, and they would silence him, and that silence would be his testimony. He did not know if he would ever see the humans again. He knew only that tomorrow he would be the loneliest voice in the galaxy. And he would speak anyway.